The Legend of Heroes Trails as a series, which somehow feels incomplete to say even though it is definitively the series' name, is the most structurally bound series in existence. Every game, every arc, every new chapter follows the same formula that was instilled in the very first game, Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. You're still going to different locations every chapter, doing menial tasks for the first part of that chapter, finding out new things about the world, the climate of the town or city, and helping out the townsfolk in their time of need. Then in the second half of each chapter is where the proverbial shit hits the metaphorical fan. A place gets burned down, a building destroyed by a magical creature, Enforcer number 15 decides to plot twist you. Every time, this formula is the same, giving every piece of content enough time to breathe within the context of it, and making these games become unfathomably long if you want to read every new piece of dialogue, or simply do every quest in the game, not caring about how NPC dialogue changes every time there's a literal new story beat. None of this is a bad thing. Look, I've got a Trails poster on my wall. It's the only poster on my wall. I've got a Falcom shelf up there. Hell, I've even got a Valimar model kit. I love this structure. It's comforting. It feels like home. And the space it creates from letting its characters and cast breathe throughout these games, and what they do within this formula, really make for some of the best moments in fiction for me. So while people might say that something being formulaic is bad, that isn't true, but that's a different video entirely. Formulas are what make the world work, especially when it comes to gameplay loops and stuff like that. But this series is structurally bound, and that is, except for a single game, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, the third. I don't know why I giggled saying Legend of Heroes. Trails in the Sky the Third is a game I want to do a deeper dive on one day, because I'm not a massive fan of it, to be honest. I think it's just fine. Although I appreciate the story, the visual novel sections don't grab me, and the central gameplay loop of the dungeon doesn't do much for me due to the lack of flair it has in design, both source-wise and mechanically. It's the only game in the series to really take a stab at messing with the structure of these games. Taking what is originally exactly as described above, it's just that for 2 games, and turning that into a dungeon crawler with the cast of the first 2 games, with some extra characters that you've seen in the first 2 games. All of this is cool, neat, sick, fantastic. I just didn't really vibe with it when I played it 3 whole years ago, which isn't that long ago, but like feels like a lifetime ago. Fast forward to today, The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie releases, after a long wait for it to come out in English, and it's great. And it's also the second game in the series to mess with the structure of these games. This one features 3 different protagonists that you can switch between at any point, doing 3 different stories that interweave together through crossing over and characters coming back and forth and so forth. It also features a dungeon, which is very similar to the one in the main game of Sky Third, which they even say in-game has similarities to Phantasma when they get there. These structure changes, however, are probably my favourite part about Trails into Reverie, and a lot of the reason why it's probably currently my favourite in the franchise. If that fascinates you as much as it fascinates me, then sit down, grab a snack, because today we're going to be talking about Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie and how it's going to run away with Game of the Year 2023. Let's get into it. When I set out to make a Trails into Reverie video, I sort of sat there and decided I would want to do one of the standard, quicker reviews, going over the gameplay, what it brings to the series, you know, the usual stuff. A lot like my Fire Emblem Engage video from earlier this year, if you haven't seen that, although somehow it did well. It's 2 months after release, so thanks for watching that, I guess, if you watched it. But after playing the game, sure, I could talk about the revolutionary gameplay that every single developer should learn from and how United Fronts are a perfect addition. Maybe I could talk about the coolest story in the series, and yeah, I could even stretch to talking about the soundtrack, which goes so hard, my entire playlist now has a Reverie song, every other song in shuffle. This is all fine and dandy. In fact, it's actually great and exemplary. But I just gotta talk about the True Reverie Corridor, man. That shit is just so good! It's where the game gets its name, and honestly, I can see why. I probably spent half of my playtime here, of my 89 hours that I spent beating this game to the post-game ending, and like, I didn't even do like everything. I didn't do all of the mini games. I didn't do all of the daydreams because I want to go back and do them eventually. I need you to understand 40 hours of side content is a lot of side content for me because I don't usually do much side content in my games. If you're unaware of what the True Reverie Corridor is, imagine mementos from Persona 5 cranked up to 11. Now, if you don't know what Mentos is, you should go and play Persona 5 or Trails, preferably both, actually. But anyway, it's a randomly generated dungeon that persists throughout the main story of Trails into Reverie. You can access this at any time from the menu with the slickest transition in gaming, and unlocks more content for you to dungeon crawl through as you go through the main story. In fact, every chapter, every act, I guess they're called, has a new layer for you to go through. And then post-game, they unlock a lot more for you to do, which also has a story as well. It's a whole thing. We'll get to it. But that's just the half of it, because with this being a Trails game, there is no small amount of side content within this side mode. I love this series. By doing the main content of the True Reverie Corridor, which is the dungeon crawling thing, apparently, you can gain access to the true main content of the True Reverie Corridor, which are the mini-games and side stories. This is actually exactly like Trails in the Sky the Third, although all in one area now instead of spread out throughout Phantasma. This is honestly really exciting loop, because as you get them in the dungeon, they're presented as ceiling stones, meaning you don't know what you got until you go back to the Reverie Garden and unseal it to see which one you got. Now, I'm not sure about this, but I think all of the daydreams and minigame content is fixed on how you get it, but obviously the regular items you get from Silver Sealing Stones are all RNG based, as that's literally just a gacha pull. I will say, when you're initially presented with the idea of doing a daydream about characters you genuinely don't enjoy, it's a bit of a letdown. But honestly, and I mean this wholeheartedly, there wasn't a single bad daydream in the bunch, with my favourite ones actually coming from daydream reveals where I said, oh god, why would I want to see those characters interact? Anyway, I will be here for 20 minutes talking about that. Back to the dungeon. The dungeon was where Trails in the Sky the Third fell flat for me. I frankly just didn't enjoy its design when I played it 3 years ago, which I know I've already said feels like a lifetime ago, but I cannot stress that enough. Honestly, when I give Sky Third another chance down the line, I might enjoy it a lot more than I did originally. Everyone loves Sky Third, but I don't know. I feel like I didn't get it. So maybe I don't know. Maybe you know, me being smarter now, I will understand why it's so good. 3 years later, again, a lifetime ago. Either way, Reverie's dungeons are much the same at their core, but with some additions, seemingly from Falcom's fantastic habit of trying it once, then continuing to improve on it as time goes on. Like, seriously, I love innovative stuff as much as the next guy, but iterative sequels are just as cool, if not cooler. I'm getting sidetracked again, but Reverie's dungeons build upon Sky Third's in meaningful ways, such as introducing room variants akin to something like Mentos' floor variants, and more like stuff from Mystery Dungeon with the rooms that are different in those dungeons. These can be things like the treasure rooms, where there are 3 chests, and when you walk back from the opening room, mob spawn. Or something like spires that appear across the dungeon and have you battle with allies that are back at the Reverie Garden, so you can get access to goodies inside of that spire, inside of the Reverie Corridor. Basically, the Reverie Corridor makes everything enticing by being rewarding, giving you some good rewards for literally anything you do in this side mode. You can open chests that give you your new best equipment, or a quartz that changes the game for you, or you can simply get a bunch of U material from the silver ceiling stones and trade for better materials. Everything feeds into making your party and gameplay better, which makes the Reverie Corridor and the main story more fun as a bonus. And I can't understate how fun it is to just run rounds with the Reverie Corridor. Trails' combat system is my favourite in gaming. With the amount of flexibility it gives you in building characters with entirely different gameplay styles, you can genuinely run the Reverie Corridor for hours without end. Like I've said, I finished Reverie in 89 hours, and I hand on heart believe about 40 to 50 hours of that was just Reverie Corridor. I mentioned the gacha rewards a bit earlier, and yeah, it's gacha, which might already make some people turn off from this idea, which is valid, but due to it being a single-player game with really no useless materials, every single thing you get from Silver Ceiling Stones is actually worthwhile in some way. You get a mute 1 quartz, kind of a mid reward, but hey, you can put it and the 15 other ones you have towards getting a mute 4. Damn, no you are in this pod, but at least I got 400 Sapith and 100 U material. Genuinely, and I mean this wholeheartedly, they try to give you bad rewards, but just end up giving you progress, which means there are worse rewards, sure, but there are no bad rewards at all. You can argue the costumes are kind of bad, but like, I'm the outlier there, that I don't use costumes in games for the most part. So, I don't put that on the game, I put that on me being a fucking idiot. If you think I'm lying about the quartz analogy, by the way, up until the game unlocked higher strength buffs, I was rocking at least 3 different mute, poison, speed breaker, and so on fours on my characters. They give you a plus 120 strength buff, meaning until you hit the finale, or even really post-game, they're simply the best buffs outside of specialized gems like the Cornelia gem. So, really, I couldn't get enough mute 3s when I was unsealing my stones because, yeah, Rain could use another 120 strength. Why not? Getting these pulls in the gacha machine obviously makes your builds better, and in the end game you can pull some seriously, like, insane stuff. You can get stuff like Passionate Rouges, Still Blues, the upgraded versions of those. Hell, even some quartz and accessories that take a few hundred, if not 1,000 U material to trade for. This then feeds into making the gameplay in Reverie something you can spend literally dozens of hours trying to optimize for the best experience. This goes for the main story as much as it does side content. The example I want to use is one you've been seeing on screen this entire video, and that is Crow Armbrust. Crow has always been one of my favorite characters in Cold Steel. He's cool, cocky, has my favorite weapon type in fiction, and he definitely pays back his debt, however high the interest is. One issue I've had with Crow since Cold Steel 3 is that they removed his wildcard craft. This craft is essentially the same as Lecter's spellcard craft in Reverie, giving you a random buff for party members or a debuff / one-hit KO for enemies, with no downsides and having a small price for usage. After they removed essentially the one use I had for him, I just couldn't find a build for him throughout Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4. Nothing worked at all. I made him into a sick tank, but I don't really enjoy using tanks in RPGs. I'm way more of a DPS guy. But I really wanted to use him, as he's a favourite character of mine and canonically should really be on the front lines with Rain after everything they've been through together. So, I sat down after about 30 hours of Reverie, and I said to myself, we are making Crow fucking work. And thanks to the Reverie Corridor and its rewards, I think I found something. I tried a couple things, pure DPS, defensive attacker, even an evasion build, but nothing was working. I thought it was done. I thought Crow was relegated to the sidelines. I just thought they didn't, give him enough stats to make him good. That was until a good friend of mine, Ghoulie TV, or Sam, said to me, what about Critical Hit? When he said that, I was like, well, that's never worked before. But sure, we can try it. And thanks to the Reverie Corridor's rewards, we suddenly had enough U material and quartz and sapith to actually make an insanely good critical hit guy. So that's what I did. Crow became my crit guy, which is partly because of his original master quotes hinting at that, but we had experimented with critical hit people in Cold Steel 3, 4, even 1 and 2, and they just didn't work that well, for me anyway. But thanks to the Reverie Corridor's new rewards, the elevated amount of stuff you're getting out of the Reverie Corridor, we finally had enough to make a good critical hit guy. I had Crow at 60% crit before Endgame. In Endgame, he was above 80, and I think we got him to around 90% by the final boss. That's insane. He became my main damage dealer and a BP like generator. He was incredible, like probably like my favorite party member that we had in the entire game. And this meant I got to use one of my favorite characters in Cold Steel as a party member that I hadn't been able to use in previous games, thanks to the rewards I got from doing the Reverie Corridor and a little bit of patience. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but building characters in this combat system is one of my favorite things to do, and finding new ways to build characters is always a blast. Having Crow banter with Rain after every fight about that one line in Cold Steel 1 made me smile more times than I could count. Just having him in the party, making remarks about stuff in the environment was great. It genuinely made the game and my appreciation of Crow as a character go up, which is probably the highest praise you can give to a side mode or side content. Now, I feel like I've spoken enough about the regular part of the Reverie Corridor, which is the dungeon, but frankly, a lot of the meat of the True Reverie Corridor comes outside of that section in the mini-games and daydreams that you do. The other parts of the Reverie Corridor are just as significant as the main dungeon section itself, and I probably think this part of the game is somehow even more fun than the dungeon. Let's talk about mini-games first, because let me tell you folks, Puyo Puyo is fantastic. Wait, not that, sorry, I mean Pom Pom Party. I'll put it bluntly, when the PS5 launched, I picked up Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 and genuinely thought it was incredibly fun, and it was my first exposure to Puyo Puyo in any form. And since then, I've always been on the lookout for some Puyo Puyo games and on the lookout for more games like it. So when you give me the best JRPG series in existence and mix it with the best slime dropping game known to men, you're onto a winner. Pom Pom Party is not only tactical and fun, but also meaningful to the main story because you get to actually destroy your least favorite characters in an actual video game inside of a video game. So that's right, Marcius. I actually enjoyed kicking your ass. There's also other returning minigames too, like Vantage Masters, which is great as always and proceeds to confuse me at any given opportunity. I love card games, but holy shit, building decks confuses the absolute fuck out of me. Aside from that, we're all about the new minigames, well, except for one returning from Trails in the Sky the Third. So I guess we'll start with that one. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is a returning minigame, and is also something that belongs in the deep recesses of hell. Let me tell you something, The Chase is a brilliant quiz show. I make time for it throughout the week, and on numerous occasions I have been told by family that they think I'm incredibly smart for knowing a thing or two about Arthurian legend, and of course I reply, well, I love history, obviously, I love Arthurian legend, but in reality the answer is I've watched Fate Stay Night. I wish that was a joke. That's not a joke, that's happened about 3 times. Anyway, this is a long way of saying that I love quizzes, and this quiz show is fantastic too. Until you get past the first stage. Holy shit, how do you expect me to know who the captain of the lacrosse club is? Okay, luckily I knew that one, because I've done every Elisa social link. How could I not know it was Ferris? But the swimming club? Okay, fair. I also knew that one because I did every Laura social link. Okay, yes, I'm obsessed with trails. Of course, I know the answers to some of these. But let me tell you, some of these questions are evil. Who shares Sherazad's age? Brother, 2 of those are some of my least favorite characters in this arc. I have no idea. Why does Cold Steel 2 start? Well, obviously that one's easy. It's Yumiya Village. Motherfucker! When you get to the higher difficulties, it's genuinely like, what did Rean eat for breakfast on July 3rd, 1206? Which is hilarious because it's the most anecdotal things about Trails lore, and while it's infuriating to get stuff wrong, I wouldn't have known some of these things without it, so I guess it's a net positive. Anyway, moving on to something else that is also a net positive, the Magical Elisa minigame. And yes sir, this shit slaps. Not even because of the pretty decent Star Fox-like gameplay of this, it's just because it takes place inside of Tokyo Xanadu? Or at least, like, in the same place as Tokyo Xanadu? Which, okay, that makes sense. Like, this minigame has an entire plethora of backstory, and it does indeed exist in Tokyo Xanadu. But let me tell you, when they cut to this screen, I screamed very loudly. It's also just a fun story with some great characters, and it's all around fun. There's a couple more too, like the mech mini game where we get our first action combat in the main series of Trails, but frankly I don't really have much to say about those mini games. I also do want to kind of say here that all of these mini games have stories associated with them, and that's kind of insane, but frankly I don't really think I would expect anything less from Trails. At this point it's just filled with content for you to do, but where the stories really do shine in the True Reverie Corridor is in the daydreams. The daydreams are essentially just mini episodes of side stories about characters before Reverie. This can range from Marcus and Dudley's relationship blossoming over a morning coffee, all the way to one about Olivier and Sherazad's wedding. These are genuinely really great a lot of the time, and even the weaker ones are still pretty good. This part of the Reverie card is one of the things I was looking forward to doing the least when I got there, because every single one I got from the gacha was simply about characters I did not care to see anything about. Even ones like the Marcus and Dudley one, which had me groan at two of my least favourite characters in the series in one single daydream as the focus. That was actually pretty fun to watch. Hell, Sharon, Claire, and Sarah have one together, and as mentioned earlier, I do not like two of those three characters. Luckily, it focused on the one I do like, and was actually maybe my favourite of all the base game ones. And there's the kicker too. There's actually some in post-game, and I do kind of want to talk about those, so skip to whatever this says, to skip the spoilers, but the one that comes at the end, after the end of the final boss, so skip here. So, let's talk. The first post-game one you get is about the Grandmaster, and the plans for Calvard, which is simply cool. But one thing I want to bring up about this daydream is that this is the Grandmaster's only appearance in this game. And she's on the cover. I'm genuinely befuddled as to why she's the cover art for the game, because if there's something, like, there has to be something bigger at play here. This is Falcom we're talking about. Like, I have no idea. Me, and again, as mentioned earlier, Sam, Ghoulie TV, go subscribe to his channel, we have a running theory that the Grandmaster is actually Adios, and I don't know, the fact she's on the cover of this game is, like, baffling. She's in one scene. It's like there has to be something larger at play here. There has to be. There are also a couple of more post-game ones right at the end after you beat the final boss, to the best final boss theme in the series and history, actually. And I really want to focus on one, which is the Elaine or Claire one. The Ren one was great too, but frankly, every one that leads into Kuro is fantastic. Like, it's just great. I'm so excited for Kuro. But the Elaine one is genuinely one of the best scenes in the series. They spend the time introducing Elaine here, and, like, frankly, she's already one of my favourite characters in the series just from this daydream. The lines here about her self-doubt, the specific phrasing of some of them, really hit home for me, genuinely. And finding out about how Elaine, Van, and Renee, I want to say that guy's name is, her friend in the Calvardian Intelligence Division, Rene. I'm assuming it's not Ren, because we already have a Ren. So, but yeah, those three are childhood friends and on different sides of the law. Makes the premise of Kuro way more intriguing to me. The fact that Elaine's a bracer, Van is a sort of private investigator type deal, and Renee's in the Calvardian Intelligence Division, like, that's going to make that dynamic really interesting in Kuro. All in all, the True Reverie Corridor is incredibly fantastic. I would go as far as to call it the best side content put into any video game ever. You have literally everything in this, from neat interactions to satisfying gameplay loops to some story reveals and side stories. It's a little bit of everything, and frankly, no other game has had me this engrossed in side content for this long. It just has immaculate vibes from top to bottom. So that's about all I have to say about the literal side content of Trails into Reverie. About 4,000 words. Imagine I was talking about the entire game. I would be here all day. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment your thoughts about the game down below. I'd love to hear, your thoughts about the side content and Trails into Reverie. But either way, I'll be seeing you around.